Hi all, my name is Michaela Rollins. I'm also an MA student in the UCLA Getty Conservation Cultural Heritage Program. The UCLA Getty IDP acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of Tovangar, the Los Angeles Basin and South Channel Islands. As a land grant institution, we pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and our relatives past, present, and emerging. The students would also like to acknowledge that we are visitors on the traditional land of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples, and that as visitors, it's our responsibility to educate ourselves of the history and make our own efforts towards reciprocity. We are attaching a link in the chat to the Native Land website where you can learn more about the tribal communities in your own area. And I'll hand it back to Cheyenne.
So first off, we want to thank everyone for being here and welcome you to our conservation conversation series. This series allows us students to invite guests with different roles within the broad conservation and cultural heritage preservation community to share their knowledge with us. And today we are so excited to welcome Julia Brennan and Lilian García-Alonso. Julia of Caring for Textiles has worked in the field of textile conservation since 1985 and is committed to the protection of cultural property. Since 2000, she has led collections care and conservation initiatives in Bhutan, Madagascar, Algeria, Indonesia, Laos, and Thailand, including the preservation of victims' clothing in Cambodia and Rwanda. Providing colleagues with sustainable skills is demonstrated in her 2019 project and publication, Our Ancestors Knew Best, quantifying traditional textile preservation methods and materials in Asia. She has a BA from Barnard College and an MA in art crime from the Association of Research in Crimes Against Art. Didn't know that, that's really cool. Lilian is a professor and co-founder of the Traditional Technologies and Sustainable Laboratory, which tries to generate interest in the rescue and appreciation of biocultural heritage and traditional technologies as sustainable, ecological, and necessary options in contemporary restoration. She is a clinical laboratory technician and has a bachelor's in conservation, a master's in the study of the relationship between artistic productions and societies, and a PhD in Mesoamerican studies. She firmly believes that the exchange of knowledge is an act of generosity. And with that, I will hand it over to Julia and Lilian.
Thank you, Cheyenne, and thank you everyone at UCLA for inviting us. We're really pleased to be here. As you all know from this introduction, I was fortunate to work in Southeast Asia for the last 20 plus years, and one of the biggest and most rewarding projects was working with young stewards of culture and teaching conservation and preventive conservation. But what I discovered was people didn't know that much sometimes about their own cultural traditions of collection care, and that we all agreed that it was important to try and integrate some of the local practices and knowledge into their professional museum-based practices. So this was sort of a grassroots approach to collecting information. It was, fortunate in Thailand working with so many weavers and dyers who are, a wealth of knowledge, of traditional knowledge. And so we were able to put together a team of researchers who applied conservation practice, and they learned time-honored experiences of their elders and the importance of this traditional knowledge and the materials and the methods. And we were able to add scientific workshops, thanks to Lilian, and begin to integrate this into museum practice. And so the culmination, of course, was the production of a book, which is, I believe, it's not sold out because it was never sold to begin with, but I believe the run of 1,000 copies has been fully distributed. And I have a few copies that I can share with other libraries. So what I really wanted to do was help everyone, all of my colleagues, create a conservation that was suitable to where we were working, utilizing local practices and addressing sustainable methods. And so this was a way of saving both tangible and intangible heritage and establishing connections also with nature. Most of the people I worked with, no matter where they're originally from, they're in big cities and they've graduated from universities, and life is very professional and not very much connected to nature. So we wanted to really put together a kind of a conservation that's suitable for that environment and that location. So over 3 years, we had 10 researchers and about 30 workshop participants and experts, specialists, and 4 workshops. And in the end, we collected and studied 62 plants, 16 for insect mitigation, about 10 or 12 for saponins for wet cleaning, and about 8 or 10 for stain removal. So it was a pretty robust project. It took some time. As you can see, it started in Southeast Asia, actually in as early as 2013, working with my Thai colleagues, trying to identify some local materials that we might add to our toolkit at the museum in Bangkok. And in some of the workshops, participants from Burma and Malaysia and other places brought with them sample plants and said, well, can we use this, or can we use this traditional paper? And it really got us thinking about how we need to really dive in and make this a project with research capability and some receivables at the end. So we did our pilot project in Thailand, and that was a great success and taught us, gave us the step-by-step methodology, and then we expanded it to Southeast Asia. And at that point, I, by chance, met Lilian at an AIC meeting. She had a beautiful poster up about an orchid that she had located in the jungle, and she had identified this orchid and an old process of making both a consolidant and mucilage from an Aztec codex. And she was sharing this information at an AIC meeting. And I thought, wow, I need to find this person, because this is what we need to do with the plant material that we're starting to identify throughout Southeast Asia. So a series of partnerships and workshops and several years of collaboration to produce the publication of the book, Our Ancestors Knew Best. And so then the pandemic came, and maybe about a year or so ago, Lilian contacted me again and said, I think it's time to start this back up again, and let's try to do this in North America. And so this is where we are now. And actually, Cheyenne is one of the members of a working group that we started last year. In Southeast Asia, we basically had 2 phases. One was the cultural, tangible, intangible, the collecting, and the other part was the scientific and the testing and the publication. So we set up these systems with a full-time project manager who did all the MOUs, the funding, the payments, maintained the correspondence, identified the logistics, and did all the logistics for 4 workshops, fact-checking, worked with the botanists on the plant databases, and really saw the whole project to completion. So we couldn't have done it without the support of Simeo Spafa and the project manager. This is just our basic methodology. We developed questionnaires and worked with the researchers. We did short literature searches. People were really finding out about their own culture and going back out into their villages and meeting with their aunties and their grandmas, really to try to understand some of the knowledge that is part of their own story. So this is an example of one of the charts. This is saponins, and this was one of the biggest categories of plant materials that was collected, and very exciting. I mean, honestly, people brought so many different samples to the workshops, and we got to make recipes. And who doesn't like making up recipes? And cooking in the lab, and then not only trying to wash a textile, but wash your hair and your clothing and try it on all different things. So this was a really wonderful source of collaboration. And so, Lilian, you want to talk about the science and surfactants and insects?
Yes. So hello, thank you, Julia. And thanks to Julia and this happy meeting, we started working together, as she said. So we kind of knew that this idea of, implementing all traditional materials and this traditional knowledge could be a good way of trying to stop utilizing so much chemicals and stopping these toxic materials, because sometimes they are toxic. Mostly in conservation, we kind of use very dangerous things for cleaning. So the idea was good, but we didn't know if it was going to work or no. So we needed a way to do things, a methodology, and we needed to collect data. So we did these testings, these kind of samples, because we needed to see if, well, maybe we say this can work, and maybe it didn't work. So it did. But we tried to first do this on grease stains and in non-polar and polar stains and dirt stains. So we tried with 4 soaps and 4 commercially known materials, like non-ionic soaps and other things that you can buy, and they are even more, they cost a lot. So we tried, and then we did this way of cleaning, by teams. Some did this wetting the material, other ones did like with the little brushes with cotton, and then we have all these samples and we took it to the lab in Mexico City, and we did colorimetry and some tests. We took we wanted to know if this was very acidic or no, and how it worked. So we took the samples, and the results were that in most of the cases, the materials that were from plants worked better, and that the other ones were the same thing, and sometimes they didn't even work. And this was so expensive and sometimes so dangerous. So when we had this data, we put it, this is in the publication, but this also gave us the startup. We were very excited because this works, right? And at the same time, I work with students in the dissertation program and for the bachelor and master's program, and they started testing these materials, but also before cleaning, after cleaning, so they can test what happens afterwards, because sometimes we have good ideas, but 10 years go by and you have a hole and you are trying to do good to the environment, and you're trying to do good with these plants and taking this knowledge, and you are breaking the textiles, right? That's not the idea. And I wanted to say that, well, we put it in these cameras and these aging cameras, and this works. Okay, so this is working before, in the moment of cleaning, and afterwards. And the thing that makes us feel very happy about this is that we are not just taking this knowledge and saying this works because we say so, and because it's natural, because we have to protect it, because they are pets. No, this works. So now with this methodology and this data that now we have and we can share, we can keep on going, and we can keep trying more and more plants. So this is basically what we did. And we have this protocol of how to clean, this is a good idea. You have to have this kind of clothes, and it has to be, you have to wash it before, and then you have to do this. We have the ABC, and the results are this works. So now that we have this methodology, this data, we can keep on trying things. We can keep on having work from students, and we can keep on trying to reincorporate these traditional technologies in this modern way of thinking. Mostly for conservators, we have this very thing that we like to try the things that are cost more and are maybe more dangerous, you know? So that's what we did.
Do you
Your
want to
turn,
talk
Julia.
about the insect?
Oh, yes,
deterrent
and
deterrents?
yeah. And because we, as I was saying, we were very excited about this. We have also from Southeast Asia, we have this big table about other materials that were used for taking insects out, like not killing them, just saying them, please go away. So this is very important, and mostly because, as you know, in conservation for the bugs, we use very dangerous things. And we have now new laws in Mexico, at least we have a new law that says we have to be more careful about this, but we are not being so careful. So when you kill a bug, you can kill the other predator that eats that bug, and then you kill the other one that eats it, and then you make this terrible thing without knowing. It does happen. So with that in mind, we said, well, if that is happening, we should stop it. So we are trying to test this from a methodology and step by step now with plants that can be deterrents for these insects. So we're working with an ethnobotanists, ethnologists, and biology student, and we are collecting bugs, silverfish mostly, and we are starting to try this. We are also trying to test this on fungus to see if this works. And we have a long list of plants. We did some testing with cempasúchil. It's kind of a marigold, but the Mexican one. So we're trying with that, and we are going to keep on trying. And the idea now is to make this big and to make it in North America. And Julia is going to tell you what are we going to do with this. But the idea is to copy this methodology, copy this step-by-step way of doing things, this order, so we can take it to try these new ways of being respectful, not with our textiles, not just with our tangible heritage, but also with our natural heritage, because it is important. Sometimes what can damage these insects, it's also going to damage us. So we're trying to do what we can do from our side of things, the collection care side of things.
I'll say, connected to the insect deterrents, we, like Lilian said, we did not end up studying or analyzing them in Southeast Asia, which is why we want to pursue this project now with that more of a focus. But one of the examples from Indonesia and Malaysia that was so inspirational to all of us was, it's called ratus, and it's a dry cleaning technique done by smoking or perfuming. And ratus means 1,000 in Indonesian. And literally it's a kind of compacted incense that's burned on a coal fire. And the textile, you can see here, the late Ibu Nora Gunawan is showing how she takes the cloths, the batiks, and she lays them over the smoking fire. So it's an extraordinary procedure. It's completely traditional. It's a ritual of care. It's purifying and cleansing in that sense, but it's also passive, preventive. It's antifungal, insecticidal, and antibacterial. And it's something that is an inspiration. And she herself, the late Ibu Nora, was really an inspiration for all of us too. And we're very grateful that she shared this knowledge with us, because the dry cleaning is an important method in the tropics, because it helps dry the clothing out. It helps keep the insects out. And it's all made with the local plants and herbs that are compacted together, and each family and each court has their own recipe. So this is the kind of example of living traditional knowledge because a lot of the information we found was in retrospect. It wasn't being practiced anymore, but in this case, in Indonesia and Malaysia, this is still being practiced. So it's a really important example. So, you know, what we've discovered both then and also now is that looking at a plant-based approach for insect mitigation is something that is combined with integrated pest management, and always using like the golden rule, good housekeeping, tender loving care. But, you know, it's being able to have confidence in using materials that are not toxic. And that's very important. The culmination of our project, as I said before, was the publication of the book and also these posters, which we wanted to have access and free to the public and also for the non-professional. So as far as I know, this was really the first book that's been published about quantifying plant methods and materials, traditional ones for use in conservation and in textile preservation in particular. And so we gave, you know, 2 talks at ICOM. The book was distributed throughout Southeast Asia, and I've made an effort to try and get it into as many libraries as I know. And it's being used by the Tracing Patterns Foundation currently in Indonesia, Philippines, and Malaysia to do teaching workshops. So I think what it's confirmed is that this old-fashioned, this traditional knowledge and experience is legitimate, it's valuable, it's precious, and it needs to be saved and honored and used. So this is Lilian. This was our joining forces part, your work in
Yes. Yeah, because we did this with my university. We tried to make the students get in touch with this and be on board, and they are. So as I said, we have bachelor and masters, and now we have PhD students working on this. So here is they are doing these hydrolates, and they are tracking these aromatic compounds from plants. They are doing from some flowers from agave and the marigold, the cempasúchil, the flower of the dead. And we're going to try to do this with capsicum, but mostly we call it small chile, like chile from the tree is the very spicy one. So we're trying to do this too with silverfish. And it's very interesting because it involves not only conservators or laboratories, it also involves people that is around this kind of plants and people in the field, the people that work with more plants and more bugs, and people that are mostly in Mexico. Sometimes you have these museums, small museums that are next to fields for crops, you know, for taking these, the people that works with the earth and with plants, and you can't say like, stop doing this because this is near the museum. So the idea is to work together. And I'm not in charge of that kind of things because most of my students are better handlers for this than me, but I do the scientific part, and they do this thing when they go to take the flowers and speak with the people and try to make new ways of talking with people that are caring for collections, because we love to use very toxic things. I don't know why. Well, we all do. It's easier, right? And it's easier and it's more common knowledge now. But some time ago, this was common knowledge, so we can bring it back. And if we bring back this knowledge, we are also having this respect for the plants. And we are also having this traditional and value for these plants. These are not only ornate, or these are not only nice for spicing food, but these also have a use in our culture and are caring for our heritage. So I think that's very important, and the students are very happy. So that's the lab we bought, because we have this distiller, you know, from the laboratory, the glass one that's so boring and so sterile. So we brought this kind of the little one, the one that's used for mezcal and tequila, and we're trying to make everything easier, make everything more traditional, because in that way you can make this more common knowledge it's not just for the science and for the university and for boring people. It can be for all the people because it's no longer so closed. And I think that's a great idea. Now we're growing in the school. Now we have this big garden. We started with orchids. Now we have agave and cactus, and we have lots of flowers. And now we are taking the school by storm. As you can see in the window, there are more plants. They are telling me if we are going to stop, we are not. So we live in a garden that each plant works for student purposes and for ecological purposes, and mostly for taking care of our heritage. So we're very happy about this, and we're very happy that we are working in team. And the idea is that this can grow and we can do this in all North America. So this is what we want to do. Thanks, Lilian.
And my screen is jammed. Okay. So then that leads us to just last year, where we joined our colleagues in the working group, and we took this idea that Lilian's been talking about and introduced it at ATOM, which is the meeting for the Associated Tribal Library Archive and Museums, which was held in California. So here we are, our working group. And, you know, what did we learn? We learned that there's actually quite a lot of interest in this topic, and that specifically for collection care, and that it hasn't really been organized or quantified that way, that there's, like Lilian says, a concern for toxic chemicals. So trying to find a different approach. And there is a dedication to trying to preserve traditional knowledge and protect the earth and the materials. And it's very timely, it's very needed. That was reinforced that climate health is at a tipping point and museums are making ecological changes. So why not in our profession? We also learned that we really need to build a diverse, bigger community and set up guidelines for how to collect and process and study and use traditional knowledge. That's a very important foundation of this work moving forward. We made a little zine to take away, a zine. We just wanted people to be able to see that this is a hands-on kind of project, and that there are many different aspects of it. So, you know, how do we get there? This is a slide with a lot of words on it, so apologies, but you know, we're trying to figure out the strategy going forward. But I think the most important part of it is that we want to try and build a consortium that shares the vision and can do the work to build this over a multi-period of time, and a diverse group. And we're only 5 people right now working together. And everybody has a lot of other stuff going on. So we need, you know, a project manager and regular funding, and really a way to start to build a consortium and put this forward. One of the first things that we've done, however, Lilian's done, is this plant database. So this is a pretty significant step. And this is something that Lilian's going to keep building, and eventually will be an open document that can be added to, contributed to. Am I right, Lilian? And it's in English and Spanish. Yeah.
Yes, and we also we took the plants. This is from the insects. What we're doing with the insects now in North America. So we took some of the Southeast Asian deterrent plants, insect deterrent plants. So we took them and we put it on in Spanish also. And now this is just a capture because there are lots of plants, and they are also from Mexico, and they are also from North America. Well, from California and more to the north. We don't have from Canada yet, but we're doing this. So this is very big, very huge, and we're trying to do this with the entomologists and with the biology student to take the common uses, but also have what does this do to the bug, and what can do to humans, because sometimes these plants can also be toxic to humans. So we're trying to do this very, very big plant database. And we want to make this a collaboration, you know? We want more people to get on board and people to say, oh, this plant, I remember, my mother used this for that. And because sometimes it can be so everyday use that you don't think this can be work, but it can be work, like saying, oh yeah, sometimes we put, I don't know, cloves and orange peel to make the house smell good and the mosquitoes go away. Well, this can work. Okay, so everything is useful and everything is valuable. So this is what we're doing, and it's very big and it's growing and growing and growing. So please join. Thanks,
Right.
Lily.
Another part, I think another aspect is a literature search, which hasn't been done. And we know from the work we did in Southeast Asia, this was so important. It's really a way to learn so much about plants and the study of plants. It's already been done. There's an extraordinary amount of work out there. There's so many ancient texts as well. I mean, just the history of plants alone and how they've been used medicinally is extraordinary. You know, human beings have been using plants for 60,000 years, and we have archaeological record of that. And then, of course, you know, there were shamans and early medicine healers who didn't write anything down, but some of the earliest texts were Mesopotamian on clay tablets. Even the Egyptian priestesses of the goddess Isis were healers. And then if you look at Indian and Chinese medicines, you know, the Vedas and the Arya Veda go back to the 2nd century BC. And then, of course, the most prominent medicinal plant writer was Dioscorides, who was the physician in Nero's army, and he wrote the Materia Medica. And that's still, I mean, it's still a useful source today, but it continued very robustly through the Renaissance. These are 3 different texts pictured that were, one's 12th century, the 16th century one is actually Aztec. It's the little book of medicinal herbs, and that was actually an Aztec codex. And one of the people I'm particularly interested in is Hildegard von Bingen, who was a Benedictine nun in the 12th century, who was a healer, and she wrote Causes and Cures, which was also a whole compilation of plants and how they help you. And she's actually considered the founder of scientific natural history in Germany. The United States has a lot of herbaria, and this is another, you know, huge aspect of the study of plants. There are 800, and 78% are in universities. Only 10% are federally held, and the Smithsonian has the largest collection. But I think a lot of the plant knowledge that we're looking at is much more on an ethnobotany and traditional knowledge scale in many ways. I like this quote very much, that the fundamental insight of deep ecology is that underlying all of the symptoms of environmental problems, there's the illusion of separation between human beings and the natural world, John Seed. And it's very true today. We're quite disconnected from nature, and many of the traditional knowledge is handed through storytelling and from a grandmother or grandfather to a younger one. And it's through memories and oral tradition that the knowledge of plants used for healing and dyeing, cooking, warfare, utilitarian, for ceremony has been passed down. And this is very true of Native American communities. And I can't speak on behalf of it, but I did read a wonderful article recently about a DNA botanist named Arnold Clifford, and he's actually in charge of the Navajo Nation Arboretum, and he is writing a book about Navajo plants. And he's really building a much richer story of the land by incorporating both English and DNA language into the database, and, you know, combining both Western practices and Navajo in nature and science together. So this is a very important coming together of knowledge, and certainly something that would enhance and help build our understanding of the world and of the importance of plants. This is just a series of a couple of plants, having read a few books on the use of Western plants. The amole, the soap plant, was used extensively for washing. And I love the fact that it says the absence of alkali means that it's especially good for washing delicate fabrics. The gourds are also cut up and used as soap and stain removal. And the salt bush, known to be used for woolens. And these are just pulled from pretty normal, regular books off of a bookshelf in a botany library. Soaproot, of course, is pretty well known, as is yucca. And there are just so many different versions of yucca species in the United States, but both of these have been used for a long, long time traditionally. And they can be further examined and incorporated into conservation practice and collection care. This is just a slide with a lot of different suggestions of ways to get involved. It is a wondrous world. We can acquire transferable skills. I think I feel like I need to learn data literacy, both to understand how to navigate a lot of the material, but also to prevent misuse, which is very important, and be sensitive to how much information is out there and can be misused. But these are just some resources, and some of them, like iNaturalist, is an app that you can put on your phone. So I think it's very helpful to just dig into some of these things. And certainly I've spent many, many months looking at plants from this angle. So ultimately, we're really connected with the earth, and we need to make those transformations necessary to protect all living matter. And we need to study and learn from our elders. We need projects and solutions that are intergenerational. And it calls for kind of a new approach, nature and science, and incorporating this into conservation practice in such a way that we can preserve the ecosystem to better preserve our collections. The leader of Amazonia Indigenous Women, she's a remarkable person named Helena Golinga. She says, as our elders pass, so does the wisdom, the culture, the knowledge, and the profound understanding of nature. How are we going to face the climate crisis without this wisdom? So I do believe we need to prioritize inclusive and respectful and humanist conservation work. So in summary, Lilian, we hope
Yes.
that these projects, past and present, and our stories and our hopes and our questions and inspirations act as a catalyst for more awareness around these issues, and inspire you, our audiences, to work together with us and be part of the change, even if it's small ripples of change, collectively in community, intergenerationally. I think we want to come up with a solution framework and try to work together on this. Lilian?
Yes, I would say just please join us if you want to. If you want to ask something, also please do. And I know we will keep on working till we can. So please join us, and please, I don't know, let's start to think about our natural heritage in conjunction with the cultural one. So they come together, and that's it. Thank you for listening, and thanks for being here and for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you. The address at the top is the general email for our working group. And then those are the emails for Lilian and me. And this is some reading suggestions. So I could just leave the slide there. Or we can say thank you. And then we can go back to the reading slide. But thank you, everybody.